what can modern America learn from a young JFK as we
Yeah.
navigate through some crazy times?
Yeah. Things I admire about JFK are his willingness to listen to other people, listen to other sides. Um, we certainly don't see that today. I think also young people can admire his persistence in the face of so many problems he had, certainly with his health. It's interesting to read about even his sibling rivalry. I mean, a lot of brothers have that. I have that. He sort of surmounted that. I those are two things. He was very curious. So if we can learn, just to be curious, stay curious, persistence in the face of obstacles, I think that can help any young person achieve what they want to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, um, I believe one thing that you had said is like the humility creates trust. He didn't brag about a lot of things. He seemed to always kind of underplay some of his, key accomplishments, and he gained the loyalty, like being relatable, and that's just, yeah, I think like love or hate Donald Trump, that's a lot of the working class related to the we don't feel like we're being put first rhetoric, like we feel like we're being treated as secondary, and a lot of people bought into it, and but I mean JFK's was definitely a lot more authentic, in his actions.
Yeah, he wasn't. That was something very positive about him, even as president, even as a boy, even as a congressman, even as captain of a PT boat. Yeah, he wasn't a braggart. So I really kind of admired that. People wanted to laud him as a war hero, and he said, well, they asked him you know, why was he a war hero? He said, well, they sank my boat. So Trump might say, well, I saved all my men and I was heroic and everything, but JFK didn't do that. So, he had a certain shyness about him, but he wasn't a braggart. He had, great confidence in himself, a quiet confidence, which, I appreciate as opposed to someone who's a braggart.
Yeah, I mean it's to me one of his most important features, and because humility when you're a leader just has to be key. Because without it, because your job, especially when you're in politics, right? You got to relate to everybody around you to some degree. You got to, because no matter what side of the aisle you're on, we all occupy the same dirt, same air, eat the same food, from the same dirt, and it's just he seemed to have like a knack for that, and it's you know that to me that feeds over into his signs over ambition, right? He rejected privilege's easy path, but he or not science over, I'm sorry, service over ambition. I don't know why I said that. He honored his brother's legacy. He chose duty over, comfort and privilege being easy.
Right. He didn't have to go to war. And actually, he had to, get a little help from his father who pulled some strings so he could serve in the Navy. He was being trained in Belleville, but they didn't want to send him to war. And he really lobbied hard and used his connections so he could serve, you know, in battle duty. So other people like whatever Bush or Trump, they're using every excuse to get out of it. But he's pulling strings to get in. So a different kind of person there, I think. I mean, he was certainly made me thinking at that point of his political future, and it looks a lot better if you're serving in the military and in battle as opposed to administrative jobs. There's always that calculation. He wanted to be where the action was. I could say that about Kennedy. He always wanted to be where the action was, whether it was serving in the war or running for Congress or traveling throughout Europe. With all those experiences, he wanted to be where the action was.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of why he still matters, right? Leadership in this country and really around the world, it's in crisis. He was optimistic, optim, optimism with, his optimism was rooted in realism, and just him being real about things. And, he was willing to grow and change, and you've argued, we need this model again.
Yeah. Well, one example, I mean, it's not in my book, but I don't know if you're aware of Bay of Pigs. He went on TV and he took responsibility. Trump would do, his playbook is do just the opposite, is to attack, to never say, you lost or you're wrong. So, it's incredible contrast. But for a president to go on and say, buck stops here, and I made the mistake, and it's something that is difficult to do, but he did it, and I think we still respect him for that.
Yeah, and it's his early years, really kind of offer a blueprint for leaders of the future. If we want to come back together as a country and be a world leader again, we need some of those lessons to be really ingrained in the younger generation.